This video will be my first look at the all-new 2018 Giant Trance Advanced 1. My first look videos are the ones that I do before I get any trail time on the bike. I just got it built up, so we're going to take a look at the bike itself and look at some of the changes that Giant have done for 2018. Let's start by looking at the cockpit. This is an area where Giant have made some really good improvements for 2018. Just like the 2018 aluminum Trance 2 that I test rode for a month, they've increased the bar width of this bike, so it's now 780 wide. That may be a little wide for some people, so some may want to cut that down a little bit. For hardcore trail riders, I think you'll find this bar a really good length. I wouldn't go wider, but I really like the length of this one. They use the Contact SL handlebar and Contact SL stem on this bike as opposed to the Connect that comes on the lower price bikes. The Contact SL is just a lighter bar and lighter stem. And speaking of the stem is now 50 millimeters long, so they've shortened it this year down from I think 60 from last year. I'll say also that the handlebar has a really nice back sweep to it. It's got a nice bend, nice feel to it. Again, pretty much the same bend as the aluminum one that I rode a little bit earlier, and I like the feel of this handlebar. Since we're talking about the cockpit, let's go ahead and talk about this dropper seat post, because this is the best dropper seat post that Giant have ever made. I really liked the one that was on the aluminum Trance 2, the 2018. Now that one had a little bit different type of lever. This one has an underneath the handlebar thumb lever, and I can tell you that this thumb lever is absolutely effortless to push, and you can make the saddle come up super slow, you can make it come up fast. I'll go ahead and pop it all the way up, so that's as fast as you can make it come up, which is fine, but I'm telling you that the effort on this thing is nothing. It is so smooth, the feel is so good. I love the position of the thumb lever, so a great change that Giant have made for this new dropper seat post. Let's move on to the frame. So with all carbon trances, it's a carbon front triangle and aluminum rear. And just like last year, it's a new trunnion mount. This is a carbon mount. And what Giant have done is they've actually made the bike a little bit lower, a little bit longer. Really has improved the handling. I'm not going to comment too much on it since I don't have any trail time, but I can tell you from riding the same kind of mount last year, it's a good improvement. Now you do have the risk of pedal strikes with the bike being a little bit lower, but it's a sacrifice that you make for lowering the center of gravity. I think it's a good change. It's just something you got to be aware of, so you don't want to crank hard around a corner if there's rocks and roots that you could strike your pedal on. But again, the trade-off for a better handling bike I think is worth it. The cable routing on this frame is really clean. So on the right side you've got the dropper seat post going in. It stays internal all the way, so this is a totally internal dropper seat post routing. And then on the left side of the frame you do have the rear shifter and rear brake, and it stays internal until it gets down here by the shock, and then both of them come out and stay external. But it's really clean. So unlike some of the older Giants where the cables would come up by the shock, they stay down low, really stay out of the way, and really nice cable routing on the frame. The rear shock on this bike is now a piggyback reservoir. It's the Fox DPX2, so it has this piggyback reservoir. It's the first bike that I've actually owned that has that, so I'm really looking forward to trying it out and giving my thoughts on it. The 2018 aluminum one had a really soft mid-stroke in the shock. I did not really have a chance to play around with volume spacers, so I'll comment once I get some trail time on this shock to see if it feels soft. But I can tell you just by pedaling it around the driveway, it's pretty firm under pressure. So the way this one works is you've got your lever here. If you want to firm it all the way out, you move it there, and then you would move the lever here, and then fully open is right there, and it's really plush, fully open. Again, looking forward to seeing how this shock feels. And this is your rebound knob over here. It's not the top-end factory suspension, it's the Elite, which is a step below the factory, and you're missing the Kashima coating on both the shock and the front fork. But from my test of the aluminum Trance 2, I did not miss the Kashima coating. I didn't feel like the shock was any less smooth. And by the way, this is a bike that's got 150 millimeters of travel in the front and 140 in the rear. So again, the lack of Kashima coating does not concern me. Now, with it being the Performance Elite, you do have the adjustments up here to adjust the open setting. So just like the factory, this Performance Elite, you can adjust the open setting of the front shock or the fork. So it's got some pretty good adjustments. On the fork, I did go ahead and remove one of the volume spacers. So this fork comes with 2 volume spacers, and I did remove one because I like the way the fork feels with only 1 volume spacer. It gives it a more linear feel in the travel, a little bit more linear in the mid-stroke, which is what I like because the trails that I ride have a lot of small bumps, and I just think it feels better with that 1 volume spacer removed. Just like last year's Trance Advanced, it does use boost spacing in both the rear and the front. So in the back, you've got a through axle that you have to use a 6mm Allen wrench to get the rear wheel off. Really no big deal for a trail bike. So it's boost 148, wider spacing, which makes for a pretty stiff ride. And same thing in the front, you've got a through axle. It does have the Cockpit. So it's boost 110 spacing in the front. Again, makes for a stiffer front end. No quick release with the Cockpit. So just like the back, you have to use a 6mm Allen wrench to get the axle out. This bike does come with carbon rims. And what's a relief to me is the fact that you can easily get the tires off of this rim. My 2017 Trance with the carbon rims was a bear to get the tires off. I had to use 2 tire levers. I could almost do these with 1 hand. Now, obviously this is not the stock tire if you've paid attention to the specs on this bike. The bike comes with the Maxxis high rollers. I prefer the knobby nicks, and these are 2.6 wide. And you can see that you still have some pretty good clearance with the 2.6. So this is almost getting up in the plus tire range, but I just like the feel of these. The stock tires, the Maxxis high rollers, are good. They have a ton of grip on the downhills, but they have a little bit too much rolling resistance for just kind of all-around riding. Again, just like the 2018 Trance 2 that I test rode, this one does not come with tubes. So Giant includes tire sealant, and so the rims already have the tape installed. And the proper valve stem to just go ahead and set it up as tubeless. So you're starting to see that with a lot of Giant bikes. They don't even come with tubes. Giant's probably figured out that they're going to save a ton of money on tubes by doing that, and it's better for the riders. I think most mountain bikers are going to want to set their bikes up as tubeless. So including a set of tubes and having to tape up the rims yourself is kind of a pain. So it's really great that Giant's doing that. Now let's talk about the components, because this is a big change that Giant have made. SRAM has offered their Eagle component group now in a more affordable package, which is the GX. So it started off with the XX, then the XO, and now you're going down to the Eagle. And I'm going to do a whole separate review on this. I've already done a review kind of on the cassette showing that up close. But the new SRAM Eagle is a 12-speed system, so you really don't have any need now for a front derailleur with the 50-tooth cog in the back. So you've got a 10 in the back, and it goes all the way up to a 50. And the Truvative crankset in the front has a 32 in the front. So you've got a pretty good sized gear range. Again, once I get saddle time on, I'll talk about what type of low-end and high-end gear range it has, but I think this is going to be plenty of gear for trail riding. So I've been a Shimano guy for a good number of years. I've used some of the older SRAM mountain bike components. And one thing that I like about SRAM versus Shimano is how you can really just completely take off the tension of the rear derailleur cage to get the rear wheel off. Another thing that I like about SRAM cranksets is how easy they are to get off. So instead of having 2 pinch bolts and a top cap, you just got 1 bolt that you got to remove. So if you have to remove the cranks, they're really easy to get off. One thing that I was a little apprehensive about when getting this bike is the brakes. I have not had good success in the past with Avid brakes, but I've heard a lot of good things about these new Guide brakes. So these are the Guide RS, and they so far have a pretty good feel to them. I have just loved Shimano brakes. I don't like using DOT fluid in a brake system. I love the Shimano mineral oil. You don't have to worry about corroding your paint when you bleed your brakes. But I'm going to give these a shot, and we'll see how they do. I do like the adjustment features. So like Shimano, you can adjust the lever reach by an external little knob here, so you don't have to use any tools. The shift lever and the brake lever both use the same mounting bracket, so it's a really clean mounting system. But what's nice is the shift lever, you can loosen this bolt and adjust the position of the shift lever, so you're not tied to the shift lever being in one certain position. Other than the tires, the only other modification I've made to this bike is just putting on my own ESI chunky foam grips. The bike comes with some lock-on grips that are pretty nice, it's just a matter of preference. There's really nothing wrong with the stock grips. I just really like those foam grips. So this bike, as it sits with my Shimano XT Trail pedals, comes in at 27.5 pounds. Pretty much the same weight as last year's Trance Advanced 1. So even though you've added a larger cassette in the back, you still maintain about the same weight. So there's the overview of the bike. In past years, there has always been something lacking on the Giant Trance. Something that you just wish Giant would get with the times. Whether it's a wider bar or a shorter stem or a better dropper seat post. This is the first year that, looking at the bike before I get any trail time, of course, I can say there really is nothing that I think Giant have missed on this bike. It is a fully modern trail bike that's absolutely ready to hammer right out of the box. From the changes they've made to the cockpit, to the boost spacing, it is a bike that's just really going to be future-proof and has all the features that I would look for in a trail bike. So I will continue my reviews of this bike as I get some trail time on it. My first ride, I'm actually going to wear my GoPro, and I'll give you my thoughts on my first pedal strokes as I take the bike out on the first ride and just kind of talk through what I think about the bike. So keep an eye to the channel to check out those reviews that are coming up. In the meantime, if you have any questions or comments, go ahead and drop them below. Thanks for watching.